session. My name is Dian, and on behalf of Kajian Studi Ilmiah from Trisakti University, it is my pleasure to be a host for today's seminar. First, I'm going to explain you a little bit about Kajian Studi Ilmiah. Kajian Studi Ilmiah is a subdivision under the Association of Department of Architecture at Trisakti University that is engaged in the search for scientific-based architecture as well as research in the field of architecture such as conducting architectural expedition trips, research, and so on. Some of the products of our research is a book about our excursion in Bali that called Pulau Frangipani, which can be pre-ordered through our Instagram account at Excursi Ars Trisakti. And don't forget to stop by our virtual exhibition at www.artsteps.com. We appreciate all of you for joining today's event. Thanks to our media partner, Arsitekturpedia, Event Kampus, Event Banget, Media Event, Architalk, Event Jakarta, Event Mahasiswa, Ruang Mahasiswa, Webinars, Arcade. Before we get started, I would go over the few rules so you know how to participate in today's event. First, you must use your personal name as registered on the Google registration form. It is mandatory to mute the microphone during the online seminar except during the question and answer session. It is expected to turn off the video except when the host or moderator asks to turn on the video. It is expected to take part in this online seminar from start to finish and fill out an evaluation form to get an e-certificate and prepare your questions for the question and answer session. Next, I will read the schedule for today's event. In session 1, there will be a presentation from Alexis Dornier with a discussion of Balinese vernacular's influence towards practitioner architect. On the next session, there will be an outlook from Dr. Ing Oka Sindu Pribadi, MSc MM, and a question and answer session which will be guided by Dr. Retna Ayu Puspatarini, STMT, as moderator from Trisakti University. If you have any question during the presentation, please type the question on the room chat. Ms. Retna, as the moderator, will pick the questions and bring them up during the question and answer session. And we love to hear from you. For those of you just joining us, welcome. And now, without further ado, I will read the biography of the speaker, Alexis Dornier. Alexis Dornier was born in Germany in 1981, where he grew up under the constant influence of the aviation industry. Dornier studied architecture at the Berlin University of the Arts, after which he relocated to New York City to work as an architectural designer from Simplot Architecture, OMA, New York, and Rex between 2004 until 2007. 2013 marked a radical shift in Dornier's life and career, when he decided to leave his Western life behind and relocate to Ubud, Bali, where he began consulting on locally designed and built architectural projects. What began as architectural consultancy quickly evolved into holistic independent project design of his own, with a rapidly growing body of work across the Balinese landscape. Dornier is now based in Ubud, working both locally and internationally on a mixture of residential and commercial projects. For Alexis, you may start the presentation now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis. And I could talk a little bit about architecture and design and these things that we, or most of us, do 90% of the time, I think. So we're always about creating something, and maybe I can show you a little bit what that means for me and what architecture in a broader context is for me as a sort of expression and obviously my passion, one of my great passions in my life. So maybe I share the screen. Okay, so for me, architecture is about close observation and above all, I had a discussion this morning with some of my team members. It's about training oneself to look closely and to find out what is inspiring all of us, and asking questions of what inspires us and what do we actually want to contribute in whatever way, shape, or form. Some do architecture, some do fine art, graphic design, music, film. They opened up a small startup business. Whatever one does, the fundamental basis of anything is the close reading of yourself and of your environment. And your environment can mean your clients or the task or the place and the location of an architectural project, for example. So I find it very fascinating that, every morning we wake up and we see the world in which we're moving around, and we're very, in the best case, very aware of what is surrounding us. And we're always influenced by our environment, and we're always, in the best case scenario, we care much about what is surrounding us. And to zoom in on me coming to Bali, for example, I did close reading of what surrounded me, and then I still do, and I still discover things every day that I may have driven by 100 times, but every day it gives an opportunity to really carefully read very closely. And Peter Eisenman, for example, he's talking about the concept of, not a concept, but the phenomenon of close reading, being able to actually name what you see. It is congruent with drawing something, sketching something, maybe a landscape or a person or anything. The act of drawing and drafting something requires very close reading, and the closer you read, the better your drawing will be, because you're understanding contrast and silhouette and hatch and depth of a landscape. So I feel what inspires us as architects is so abundant, because everything kind of spills into your brain, into your hub, when I call it. You're very open to your fellow students, to your professors, to your culture, to your family, to what inspires or drives you or irritates you. Ideally, you're taking these streams you're soaking everything up like a sponge, and when you do cultivated acts of expression, for example, in architecture, but it can also be in music or in writing, you layer them in a congruent way, and you are not missing out on the most fundamental layers on architecture, and you're not driven by style, you're not driven by trend, at least not consciously. Maybe subconsciously you're always driven by trend, possibly. So I found it, like a act of humbleness, or however you want to call it. I'm a guest here in this country. I'm a guest here on this island that is lucky enough to be able to live here, and I want to or wanted to bring in 2013, when I came, I wanted to bring the way that I had learned, from my professors, my university, and the studios that I've worked at back in New York and also Germany. And I wanted to blend this and mix it into, what is happening here in terms of architecture. And I tried, and I'm still trying and exploring to, in a more or less direct way, to merge silhouettes, which is obviously one of the core principles in architecture is the silhouette against the sky, right? So the silhouette of let's say, a building is a great contribution to the landscape and to the cityscape, or to wherever you have simulated this project. So you have a lot of responsibility, I would say, to at least know what you're doing. So you're knowingly suggesting a silhouette. In our case, we're trying to fuse an idea of contemporary architectural topics with vernacular or traditional meanings or traditional silhouettes. And I think the exciting thing is the mix, right? It's the melting pot of different ideas, right? So you're combining, subtracting, or multiplying ideas in your head, and by doing so, you're creating a rhythm, you're creating a logic, and we were talking about language before before we started this lecture or this event. You're creating your own language, and you're creating your own bracket, but it fascinates you, and so we've been playing with a whole bunch of silhouettes that may carry a symbol in them, and they may suggest a kind of blend or sweep between a box and, for example, as the symbol of modernism could be a box, and then a pitch roof could be a symbol of Gottfried Semper's ancient hut, like the first building ever imagined is something that is a pitch, right? And then all the spin-offs that you have everywhere, like in the West and in the East. Surprisingly, in the East, it is something that is built up from architecture's thought from bottom to top. And in the West, it is more thought from top to bottom, right? So you can see Chinese or sort of Asian architecture being built up, like, for example, the Javanese joglo centerpiece. You can almost feel the compression, the heaviness, and then of it kind of cascading up, and the draping of the roof. If you think about, churches, Gothic medieval churches or other constructions, they were built from or imagined, like Antonio Gaudi or something. They were imagined from going from top to bottom. Yeah, catenary curve. It was all about understanding gravity and load. So as we assimilate, as a child would draw a house, it is a symbol, right? So we're merging something that is sort of deeply encrypted, maybe even in our DNA, is something that we know that is familiar with something that is very sort of contemporary, linear, first modern, then later postmodern. And we're trying to with this studio, we're trying to remain open with our exploration of what is contemporary. We want to quote buildings, we want to quote the rhythm of certain buildings. For example, these beautiful Minang structures, as an example, as a repetition of elements. It's almost like the rhythm of a song. So you can abstract and play with these things, and I feel as we're all, as in humans, we love our families, and we love the idea of tradition, and we love something that is coming from the past. Yet at the same time, we are open to the future, technology and fabrication methods, and obviously also design methods. For example, the Alpha House that was recently completed. That is something that is trying to meet somewhere between the past and the future. And I really like being in this space, because that's maybe the present at this moment in time. Like, you're both influenced by the forward thinking and the retrospective thinking. You're not just going without any interest or any respect for what has existed in the past. Yet at the same time, you're not always in this romantic space of what was beautiful should be preserved as such, and it shall not be changed. And I like to be in this balance, of these things, because I love both. I love both concepts, but the concept of the future and the concept of the past. And I choose the medium, I choose the expression architecture, but you can do that in anything. You do that in music, and you are combining gospel with hip hop, or classical music with other genres, and you create something that is exciting. You're extending or expanding your audience. You're talking to a wider group of people. You're maybe even breaking paradigms. You're breaking borders, mental barriers, by unifying different ideas of past context and future context. And that's what makes me wake up in the morning, is this curiosity of what other possible combinations are there, what other possible ways of expressing this synchronized interest are there, out there. And so I think for the people that are still studying, or the people maybe that may be finished in this group of the people that are joining right now, I will to study the masters of, that is something that might be quite practical on just kind of like sharpening your blade. So, you can read about Mies, and you can read about Frank Lloyd Wright, and, many of these masters that oftentimes were bound to a specific era with a specific sociological context, different questions, problems, agendas of their time. You could talk about Charles Eames, as a person who lived in a time where industrialization, or actually the mass fabrication, um, was becoming the new normal, and you have pressed plywood, and you have laminated sheet wood, where you can create molds, and that kind of kicked off its own full range of aesthetics deriving from that. So you can study the people that have worked with tensile structures, space frames, space trusses, out of the necessity to make things light. You can study Joseph Paxton and what they did with the Crystal Palace there in the UK in the beginning of actually the one before the last century. So by doing so, you will slowly know that there are some underlying principles on all these people that were doing their specific design. You can study Zaha Hadid, and you can study her history of what made her get out of bed in the morning, and she was just simply great because she took her traditional perception on architecture and just like by the speed of a lightning strike, she kind of transformed all this into something else, and now we have those buildings that embrace and are only possible because of new fabrication methods and things like that. So that means that you can be open to the zeitgeist of what's actually going on right now in terms of technology. I must say the work that we have done so far is quite simple in its way that it is built, because you also have to work with what you have accessible and available. The sculptures can still be made in a simple way, and you can go quite far with these structures, and you can just combine these notions, and you always have your diagram in mind, right? So, for example, this house, the butterfly house, and if I can sketch here, right, draw. Oh yeah, cool. Wait. Yeah, perfect. So this building here, it is actually a cross, right? So there's one building like this, and then there's one building like this. And the elevation of the first building has a pitch, and the elevation of the second building is flat. And then you sort of start sweeping from flat to pitch, and the same goes obviously for the roof line. And you start getting those segments, and then you build your blending two ideas. And this blend here, if you that is actually a three-dimensional space truss, right? So both conceptually and literally, you're taking advantage of fusing an idea that comes from, represents the symbol of the past, meaning the pitch, and something that represents the contemporary architecture, if you will. And then you use it to your advantage by understanding, and you're building a truss that you then sort of cantilever, that you then use as a structural basis of your building, that you then elevate and put on these tiangs. And these are all wood tiangs. And by just simply elevating the building off the ground. So the geographical position of this building is another layer. This is east. This is west. And obviously we live in the Tropic of Capricorn, so our sun path is varying. I think 21.5 degrees from summer to winter. So the emphasis was to create the best compromise possible and make a sort of recreational loop around the house, which is here, this pool. And the idea was that you will always have sun and always have shade at any given time throughout the year, and day. And that loop was then merging from being a pool over to being a ramp and another terrace here. Bad sketch, but this is kind of the story of one building that has a number of different layers, both intellectually, structurally, formally, context-driven, specific to the place, specific to the geographical position, and dealing with topics like, elevating things off the ground, using the passive cooling, using another sort of symbol of together alone, meaning you have this intersection as the collective space, and you have each room, each private bedroom has its own view and its own experience. So this and many other diagrams are in this building. So for each of these projects, these layers exist. And for example, House O is another very simple and very literal stack of ideas and stack of interests, if you want to call it that. So this was a building for a classical composer from Iceland, and it was fun when you have clients that are also in sort of a creative manifestation corner. So he knows about rhythm, knows about melody, knows about a concept. He's writing a lot for movies and films. And when you write a piece of music, you can, you pick a structure and you pick something that you give them a chord sequence and you give them a rhythm. So, but the beginning of everything is kind of like, after nothing comes something, and it goes back to nothing, right? It's the symbol that you choose that's formally interesting. You're manipulating a line, and you this is supposed to be a straight line. I can't draw a straight line, but this is your moment 1 and this is your moment 2, and you start again interacting in the space between two moments, and this is where you can create structurally sound principles, right? So you're creating a warped surface that is becoming much stronger than just a linear plane. And there's a sort of semi-grid shell in there, where you have one direction of your U members is all straight and the other direction is curved. So that together works really well. So the idea was to be very, very constraining and limiting our creativity, which is, I think, one of the key drivers to do architecture. I mean, at least in my opinion, successful architecture is to limit yourself. And we just limited ourselves to this in all elevations and in plan. So draw the plan curve. So the plan curve was a 90-degree rotated elevation curve. And then this plan was then flipped into the other elevation curve. So you have essentially 3 resulting curves. And then you have 3 resulting lines. Oh, sorry. So, and then you loft these things. And you create exciting moments like this amphitheater that then is the relationship to enjoying, actually having the public space of this residential building on top that can enjoy the view over some rice fields, that can enjoy passive cooling. But you still don't lose the connection to the downstairs, right? And you can literally blend 2 ideas into a sculpture that represents music or flow or topics that excite you as a human being, right? And obviously these spaces here, they then take advantage of the cooling mass of the entire project. When you read closely, you will see that this is the peristole, yeah, this is a mass. This is a peristole for a pavilion that is standing on top on these walls because we didn't want columns, right? And then there's this pavilion that is just simply standing up there, like Mies van der Rohe did a lot. So he created like a base plane or a base volume, and then he put something on top of here. So it's actually a stack of two houses, right? Two different buildings are stacked together. And why? Is because we did not want to make the house appear too big. So, 1 + 1 is something different than 2, if that makes sense. So, yeah, a little bit of an anecdote to creating then architecture. And obviously, of making things differently requires the interaction with the construction team, and that probably never ever built something like this before. But the principles are so easy that there are ways of, if you communicate thoroughly and in a respectful way, you can have the most traditionally thinking person and motivate them to enjoy like a very different and new way of building. So there are some classic notions in these pictures. There are a lot of layers in these projects. So we don't, we would never start from a design of, hey, I like curves, or hey, I like this design or not. We would think about the meta plane or the story behind these designs, right? And then be very consequent with that, and then have these spaces be impacted by your idea without trying to mask anything. And it gives, it compromises or whatever you want to call it. It definitely has an impact on the space, but you can still use that to your advantage. Okay, I slept there. You sleep really well there. It's kind of like being in the ocean or something like that. So maybe at last, the project of the still studios, which I think this only shows renderings, but we have built a few. See. Let's see if I can access these things here. Drive. Still Studios. Oh, sorry, just 1 second. I'm kind of. Alpha House, Still Studios. I don't know if you guys can see this now. Yeah, you can see this? All right. I see someone nodding their head. Okay, so these buildings are called the Still Studios. And the idea was to get things off the ground with almost like a joglo centerpiece, use the core to create a high point of which you then hang both roof and floor. So obviously tension is an amazing thing. If you observe how many tons you can hang from a cable as opposed to taking the same diameter, creating a column, and this column would buckle really fast, really quickly. So the hanger and the tie is a structural principle that is really amazing, because you can create wide spans, you can create really light architecture. So ultimately, with this project and the Still Studios, which is revolving around the topics of reducing the amount of impact, physical impact, that a building can have on the ground, and using the altitude or the height for catching more wind and more breeze, layered with the concept and idea of saving some material through like using hanger and tie construction, and sort of playing with the notion of traditional silhouettes, and then above all, maybe even elevating the in a very abstract way, like a joglo centerpiece, and finally, at last, making use of this compression element in a very, very extreme way. So you can see very different agendas and very different designs that we're trying. A lot of things are about the silhouette, the composition, and the roof, creating a bit of a fun exploration on, to what extent this silhouette has to do with something that you may find in other architectures that evoke a certain fascination, and I like to learn from these structures, and then at the same time see also their limitations. And you see these amazing shapes, but they are not tensile, they're not catenary curves, right? This is all built like a sculpture, like, and you can use these silhouettes. I mean, this is a very extreme example of a silhouette. And you can pick this, and then you can sort of elevate that into a contemporary concept. So yeah, that's maybe a little bit on the way that we produce some of the architecture. Definitely right now, what's fascinating to me is to build elevated off the ground korowai structures, Papua New Guinea, and Why? Yeah, this is great, right? And then to be inspired by this, and then I actually researched some of these they had been specifically made for a BBC documentary, but there's other structures that are actually original, right? So just the idea of just being off the ground in the jungle using passive cooling, this is really something that's so inspiring. And I'm right now working on this cabin, and other things that are playing with the notion of, maybe even using less glass, because the higher you go, the more private you are, the more wind you catch, things like that. They're making it into architecture, right? Cultivated, organized way of designing. Yeah, so I don't know if that was comprehensive or interesting or exciting, but at least it hopefully gave you guys a little bit of a insight on how one can produce architecture. So I would recommend studying the masters, finding out that there is a reason behind their gesture they're putting out, and it's not just personal taste, it's not talent, it's not only the eye that one has or not. You're not either blessed or not blessed. Everyone can train this to a certain extent, and then the more you go through these cycles, the more you'll be able to narrow your creativity to 2 or 3 things, and then like a chord progression in a music piece, together with rhythm, you give enough orientation for the listener to understand that there is a pattern. It's not just random hitting the keys and just doing whatever. It's a very thoughtful process. And yeah, I wish you good luck on your way of expressing yourselves. I think that would be it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Thank you, Mr. Alexis, for the explanation. And now for the time and place, let Mr. Oka to give the connection with the presentation from Mr. Alexis to our topic of the day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bu Ratna. Hi, everybody. Yes, thanks for the interesting description or explanation from Alexis. I see in your design concept that you are interested in tectonics. As we know that in tectonics, an art become a main soul in the action. Yes. How can you see that the both of them can be implemented in one design, either one building or neighborhood? Yes, please, Alexis. Still mute, yes.
Yeah, so the tectonics or the canonical or the cultivation of creativity and distilling it all the way so it becomes a tectonical logic is when you have achieved like a satisfactory degree of seriousness in architecture, I would think. And these canonical, there's this amazing book by Peter Eisenman, it's called 10 Canonical Buildings, where he describes where both plan and section and structure, they're becoming one, and there is such congruence in the explanation. We're far away from achieving that, but this is what we're striving for, of reaching a level of seriousness, of distillation, like an essence is distilled to its final and pure aggregational state. That is something that you can do in architecture and music and film and you name it. And I think it's very important, or it just produces a different kind of contribution to the built environment than just being led by emotions and feelings and distractions and consumerism and all these things. These are all forces that are acting on us, and we're bending it and tweaking it until it looks kind of okay from one angle, but then we see, we only show the building from one side. We have to show the building from all sides, and I think then one has achieved like a greater and more serious level of artistry, and I think craft goes hand in hand with it, and the understanding of materials and their limitations and opportunities. So that this is a book I can highly recommend, if probably already written by you students, and of course Kenneth Frampton's books are amazing on studying these buildings and these architects that mastered the tectonics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you tried to combine tropical and modernism element and industrial as well in your design concept, right? But I don't see the Balinese ornament at all in your design. How come? Have you ever worked together with Undagi? You know Undagi? Yes. You know Undagi? Balinese architect.
Yeah, I have personally. I would love to collaborate with the Balinese architect.
Yes.
So far, we have done the first architectures. They were more sort of picking up the idea of the kampung and the sort of master plan layer of things, of having several structures that all have their own meaning and purpose and composition. Yet the ornaments are not yet visible because I wasn't feeling comfortable enough to bring it across in a very elaborate and serious way. But I would love to collaborate with someone from here to get introduced to a deeper understanding of that subject. So we have certain citations of things here and there, but it is mostly the silhouette that then creates a resemblance, with the limasan and structures and certain gudang elements.
Yes, it's just a geometric form, right?
Yes, exactly.
Is it allowed not to put the ornament in building in Bali? I see in local regulation, there is a must. Yeah, I mean the local ornament should be applied in each building.
Yes, and the interpretation of that ornament, can obviously be very wide or very close or very direct. The literal use of this language and vocabulary, I think, especially when building, institutional buildings or public buildings, this might be very relevant. Most of our projects have been, residential homes and in a sort of a slightly different concept. But we have done as a choice of materials that we then use as a connection to the local building culture, like the Provocan stone, limestone, and sandstones are being used, and even the stacking of the different sort of classical components on how a building is standing on a base plate, and the face and the body manifested in a building. So we've obviously abstracted that quite drastically, quite dramatically.
And maybe this is one of the questions, because you're mentioning about meaning in your design, and you did mention collaboration with an architect in Bali. But there's a question here from one of our students, say that what about spiritual aspects? Because in traditional Indonesian culture, spiritual cannot be separate from our architecture. And how do you apply that in your design?
Yeah, so I mean, the question is what you define as spirituality, right? So it is. So spirituality obviously is something that is very connected to our awareness and has something to do with how we experience the world. And that's why certain architecture is designed in a way to evoke a certain impact on the spectator and the person. So when you have the split entry gates of a Balinese temple, and Balinese temple architecture is designed in a way to evoke a certain sense of intensity, to prepare the visitor or to prepare the person in a certain way. So it is just like you would enter a medieval church or a Renaissance palace. There is certain style elements and used to evoke certain scale, perception of how that architecture reflects back to the human being. And I think that's a fundamental question that I ask myself with everything that I do. Is it what state of mind and what state of consciousness is the person that is experiencing this architecture, and by trying to be empathic, and to imagine other people than just myself. It's like, how would somebody else experience this architecture and move around in it? That to me is a very spiritual act, because I care a lot. So in which way or to what extent you have a freedom to interpret these symbols, and to what extent you are, obliged to follow those, to follow these rules, that's a different topic, right? And I think we're always confronted with this in any way. To what extent do we take things literal? And if we take the Bible literal, and I don't want to drift off into a religious conversation here, but there is a certain degree of abstraction required, and a certain tolerance required, and flexibility to these sort of core so-called principles, and the freedom that comes out of, and the value that you give by letting something purely traditional be traditional, and you just take a big abstraction from that, then both things can shine really nicely. So I personally enjoy these sort of traditional buildings a lot, or temple architecture, but I also see that they're not that old, right? You can date back, X amount of years, and you see that there's many interpretations, and maybe they were smaller steps of evolution, but definitely, you go back 300 years, 500, 1,000, 2,000 years, people have always progressed in the way that they sort of added something new to their experience.
So does it mean that the spiritual gives you kind of a restriction to your design? Because here's a question. A questioner also said, he sees your designs are more free of style. But if you mentioned the spiritual gives you kind of boundaries, right? And what about the other boundaries? Could it be like boundaries from the topography, or what is it? Okay, and from the client, or is there any other restrictions that you have to consider for your design?
I think more and more especially what's happening in times of COVID, and being open to sort of relevant topics of our time, like what type of material that we're using, what carbon footprint they are having, how long lasting the building is, how can I make use of passive cooling, reduce the amount of AC or electrical consumption unless you have your own solar plant. Things like that are very much and more starting to impact the way that we do architecture. And we're by no means green architects, but we're becoming more and more sensitive in this direction as we see what kind of problems that we're having. And I think this is definitely a restriction that you choose. How much do you consume? What do you consume? How many cars do you buy? How many motorbikes? Do you have loud mufflers? Little things like that just the putting that into the awareness, I think, is definitely something that where my own morale, that me as a human being is reflecting on, right? So yeah, that's another constraint or opportunity.
So yeah, so you have mentioned it to us. How you conserve your signature style from being so many restrictions.
I don't think there's a style to our work. I think it's more like the type of questions that we're asking are sometimes similar, and we're building in the subtropic tropic context. We're right now thinking how to have buildings that have a lower carbon footprint, and so we're looking into designing things out of reclaimed ironwood, making profiles that you use, that are familiar from the metal, from the traditional steel building, and use like reclaimed ironwood to do so. So this will have a whole other style as a consequence of it, right? So we're just I'm just trying to stay open, and not repeat too much. So I think back to your question, like the style is not really too relevant, at least for me. If that hopefully answered your question.
Okay, so most of our viewers now are students. These questions say that, do you have recommendation of books or sources that use as a starting point to move forward, to learn to move forward for the design?
Yes. Maybe I can share this screen. So definitely this guy is like Kenneth Branton. Whatever you can get your hands on, he's like a really, really amazing person and also a great mentor. So this is a really good building. This is a really good book. And it's, I think, I don't know how many revisions he's done now, but you can get your hands on this one. And then there is Conical Buildings by Eisenman, which is the Bible or the Quran or the Veda of of architecture. Really good. And then there is let me see. Studies on technology, studies on tectonic, studies in tectonic culture by Kenneth Frampton. This is a really good one. Everyone should read this, I think. This is really fun to read because it has, this is like Louis Kahn's library in I forgot where it was. This is actually a museum. So he has a wonderful overview on everyone. And then there is a later one is by Dilla. I forgot the title. I forgot the title of a publication of Dilla and Scofidio. It's great. Also, if you can get your hands on the SML Excel of OMA, maybe you can find that digitally. That's a good one. I don't know. Those might be the ones that are good. Maybe you can have the one from Venturi. What's it called?
Venturi.
Learning from Las Vegas. Yeah. Venturi. Yeah, this one. This is about the symbolism on architecture and design and the symbol. Especially in American architecture, but there's something called the duck and the decorated shed. It is a very sort of relevant topic. And so this book is a classic, and it's really easy, kind of like an easy read. But it says a lot about the meaning of architecture and how it's changing. Yeah.
Okay. So from those books, you get more knowledge on architecture. What about from traveling? Because as we know that you are from German, and then you went to New York, and then now living in Bali. So does it also give you influence by doing traveling? And is it only one of the ways that affecting your ideas of the project, or how do you? Is there any other points to get your ideas other than from broadening your knowledge from the books and from traveling?
I think the biggest inspiration is the exploration of your own mind, I would think. And what I started with, the close reading of how you react to your environment and how you see your environment and how tolerant you can be and open you can be towards different and other cultures, and to observe your reaction on things, and I am reflecting about what my motivation consists of when I do architecture. And it's quite fascinating to dig very deep, because motivation is just not one thing. There's many things, right, that are many forces that are working inside of us. And the way this is a very big or deep and relevant exploration, is like how you perceive your own mind and how you describe this phenomenon of your mind. So, and how fast you are with conclusions, and how fast you are with explanations, and how fast I am with judging. And when I see my environment, or when I see architecture or people, or we're so fast, like, oh, this is good, this is not good, like, I like this, I don't like the way that he walks or she is, or but we rarely ask why are we so fast with this. And and when by asking in that way, being more reflective, you can sharpen your blade on knowing that what you see is not the pure, is not what it appears to be, or not only, like say, if you look at a glass or a cup of coffee, the concept of the cup that retains some water or some coffee, that is one way of seeing it. But seeing the craftsmanship of how this was done, the endless generations on the development of what this cup symbolizes, all the way into the atomic and subatomic structure of the matter of what this consists of, and the materiality. Many layers, infinite layers of reading are there. And you're not just stopping at, okay, this is a cup of coffee, I'm going to drink it and I'll go. It's a, if you are able to see and use your senses in a way that you know that those senses are limited, when you ask these questions, you can really go very deep. And then as a consequence of that, I believe you can become a better designer, because you're waiting out. You're not just governed by your own reactions. So what inspires me is a lot to reflect on the way that I behave in many fields of life. So, but of course, traveling, music, movies, conversation with people, relationship, my child, my son, my expectation towards my son, how he develops, all these things. He's a newborn, he's 2 months old. Like, this guy is just trying to, you can see you can almost look at him and observe how he's trying to put everything into an order, right? Not sure if that's good or not, but he's trying to survive, right? Like all of us, trying to give some meaning to this.
So basically what you're telling us is being aware with your surroundings is important. Is that one of the biggest challenges in designing a building for you?
It's one of the biggest challenges for every human being. Whatever it is they're doing, when they're designing, when they're talking, walking, consuming, ultimately that's the most relevant thing you have in life, right? And yeah, I mean, whether I do that in a successful way or not, I don't know. But that's how I'm spending my time, trying to, talk with the guys from the studio, have a conversation, ask them for their opinion, think about it. Just being like, trying to be open, or being open, is essential to creating a good, not only good architecture, but to be a good human being, I think.
Okay, this is one of unique questions, I think. Looks like the person looks at your website and notice that through the assumption that your design from one design to another design is kind of related. I mean, like, why not you're making something else new of your design?
Yes, some projects they create these sort of families. One, for example, the still studios, they're working, with elevated off the ground, tensile structures, and then you have a limited vocabulary, and you explore that, and you transpose these ideas and slight variations. Same goes with the shape blend of roof silhouettes, is where there are similarities obviously, the biggest similarity is that they're all in the same sort of tropical context, overhangs and the way that they're positioned, oftentimes stretched very long from east to west to self-shade, to look north or south, to reduce solar heat gain, make use of passive cooling and things like that. So yeah, there are similarities between certain projects. Also, you stumble over a new genre, something that you were inspired by, and then might keep you busy for 5, 6, 7, 10 designs, and then you move.
And you at the beginning you mentioned that you went to Bali since 2013, and why you decide to live in Bali and have your architecture firm in Bali and especially in Ubud? What is the reason?
I love. It's a combination of everything. I mean, I love the mentality and the openness of this island in so many different ways. When you study the history of this island, it's quite remarkable how many influences are there, especially in the last century. Walter Spies and a lot of painters came here in the 20s and 30s. I'm just fascinated by the thick tissue of tradition, celebration of values like family and upchara and these festivity. That is something that is almost lost where I'm from. And it's not only about consumerism, Coca-Cola and Christmas and stuff like that. So I personally, I love that. I love the opportunity of obviously Bali is a tourist destination, and there is demand for architecture. It is not done yet like the West. And I love surfing. I love doing sports. I don't like the cold too much. So yeah, my dad lives in the Philippines, so it's not so far away. Maybe that's also in the family.
Okay, so you can say that your love for Bali, yeah, fall in love for Bali.
Not only with Bali. I mean, there's 17,500 islands. Through surfing, I go to other places and went to Sumatra and Lombok and Sumbawa and Sumba and these places are all worth seeing, and it's just amazing how an archipelago can be so, on each island is something different going on. There's a different interpretation of, Islamic culture, Hindu culture, animism, Christian. There's so many different ways of coexistence. Obviously, that was also part of crisis, in so many levels, but it shows the diversity, and there's so much to explore, and you probably can't make it in a lifetime.
Okay. And then so looks like many students interested with your design, and one of the question that is given, is there any possibility for them to internship in your firm?
Yeah, just send your portfolio, and if I can give you some tips about portfolios, if you want to hear that, like, is when I did my portfolio to work for Remkolas, that was obviously a prestigious firm, and everyone said, no, you can't do that, you can't work there, and it's hard to get in or something like that. I just like went there, but I'm not recommending that because we don't have our new studio yet. But anyways, and we're also scattered, Jakarta, India, Ubud, Uluwatu, you name it. But think about when you do your portfolio, don't think about like how you present. Yes, you can think about how you present your work, but above all is like people want to know like what drives you, what motivates you, like what human being are you? Are you open? Are you curious? Are you, what is fascinating about architecture? Plans and drawings and all that stuff is a craft, and that craft can be learned. But above all is like, how do you interact, and like how creative, or how can you question the format of a portfolio so you can create a little bit of innovation in there. The portfolio doesn't always have to have a cover page and 15 pages and a CV and a photo, and a portfolio can be many things, right? Think about the style. Maybe it's a song, maybe it is a short movie clip that you just sketch. Something that shows that you can actually leave your comfort zone and that you're not limited by how you see the world today. You're actually interested how you don't see it yet, if that makes sense. So please go ahead.
No, finish, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so when I applied for my university in Berlin, they said, you have to submit, 5 drawings and photographs of sculptures that you have done, a manifesto why you want to do architecture, things like this. And they said this is a format A1, and not more than X amount of pages, and obviously because they had a logistical problem, right? If everybody would submit a big sculpture, you have a mess, there at the university. But I thought, what if? So I can't submit something 3-dimensional and only 2-dimensional. How can I create something that is submitted 2D and then becoming 3D? And then, so I spring-loaded the portfolio pages with a spandex. So, and it was something close, and there was like a red arrow there, and I said pull here, and then somebody must have pulled there, and then this thing kind of exploded.
That's awesome.
And just went into like a big giant M with slats in there, and in these slats were like 5 drawings of a sort of small animation of that book unfolding. So it was it was like a sketch of what just had happened to whoever opened this book. So there was nothing. I did not put a single sketch in there. I did not put anything in there what they asked me to put in there, because I thought, they already know this. Like, I can't sketch well anyway. My sculptures are not really pretty. I won't impress them like this. Only by challenging what people require from you, that's when you can score.
Okay. So yeah, one last question. Mentioned that after me, then Mr. Oka. Is it okay, Mr. Alexis? Because so many questions. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yes. I
Hold on.
see. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Can
Okay.
we
You've
one
been
more thing is okay, please, Mr. Oka.
sorry. Well, I know that you're living in Bali since 2013, right, Alexis? So
Yes.
almost 8 years, yeah. Then I guess that you know well about the Trihita Karana, the main concept of harmony among people, nature, and God. Yeah. How do you implement this in your design?
Well, I think that we're trying, when doing canonic or tectonic stuff, it is to see things holistically, and the implementation of this, what you just said, hasn't happened literally, right? But I think the blending of a building into its environment, the continuation of landscape through the building, the idea of collectivity and together and alone, different spaces for different functions, is something that is accompanying the discourse.
I was wondering, when you're talking about landscape, how do you see landscape in Bali as a basic of your design? Is there any difference between landscape in Bali and in other places?
Well, I think it's, in Bali, for example, here in the Bukit in the south, it's very dry, and nobody wanted to go here until it was discovered by some surfers maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago. This was no man's land. Nobody would ever go there, except for because this is a rugged land. It has been deforested. The vegetation has been destroyed long ago. And as a consequence of that, there's not much water here in the dry season. So the climate is very different, and the architecture has different requirements here. If you go up to Jatiluhur or these places like high up in the mountains, I think the requirements are different. Ubud Gianyar, different requirements. So I think in Bali, there's so many different landscapes, which is quite surprising to me. So we're having projects in all these different regions. So we're using things like rainwater catchment and different requirements on different roof shapes, and also climate-wise, there's different things that we implement. So you go to Lombok, the same thing happened. Large 80% of the forest has been destroyed through agriculture over the past 200 years. We're trying to work with reforesting the landscape. So the landscape is a big part in recreating small ecosystems, even if it's just a tree. A tree is its own ecosystem that attracts bats, that gives food for flies, and then becomes food for other things. So I bought a 3-hectare piece in Sumbawa, which is essentially completely dry 8 or 9 months out of the year, because people they plant one cycle of corn, one son of corn, and we're trying to suggest, a reforestation for this, to give farmers new opportunities. For example, trees. You can plant trees and you can farm trees that can be turned into building material, but then can also be turned into ecosystems again. So landscape is a fundamental part of this, and it's definitely on our agenda to bring it back because obviously the planet is not getting colder. On the contrary, and I think this is super critical.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah. Then I see that you want to plan to live in Bali until maybe, I don't know, forever, or
maybe like Madhe Vijaya, I don't know, but so I can say I love it here for the time being, and I hope to learn much more, especially from the stuff that you had said and mentioned. So because you never stop learning, and just there are so many blanks and so many gaps and so much stuff I don't know yet, which I'm very open to learning. So yeah.
Okay. Bist du alleine oder mit deiner Familie in Bali bis jetzt?
Mit meiner Familie. Yeah. I have a 2 months old son, freshly hatched son. Yeah.
Okay then. Good. Nice. Okay. Thanks. That was last question, or I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, I got disconnected. Okay. You mentioned that you work also with local architect. What about local craftsmen?
Oh, that's so amazing what we can do here. We're working with, BioLiving. Lim Masulim, he's obviously on the forefront on understanding and bringing together the traditions of weaving across Indonesia. He's doing very exciting stuff. The concept of joining fibers into a pattern in form of textile or mats, or that is just in itself universe, right? It's amazing what can be done in here, and the skill set is just outrageous. The same with the stone and form work that is, the craft of what's possible in terms of ornament and sculpturing. It hasn't even been tapped into, like you said, Paokai. There is such a richness in these ornaments. Limit your architectural design to only what's there. You can spin that off for decades, I think. So, and that isn't even talking about the other islands. Ikat and these things. We can just go on forever.
Okay.
Okay, well, yeah. So that's the last questions, and it's very interesting. So basically, from explanation, in order
the connection is not clear.
To really, what?
The connection is not clear enough. The voice is not clear. Your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Just go ahead.
Okay. What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right then. So basically, what I want to make conclusion that from your next presentation, in order for us to do design of a building, we have to understand of our surrounding. If we're living in the tropic, to be friendly and be part with the elements surrounds us, right? That's from your presentation that I can basically give a conclusion for that.
Very well
Okay,
done.
then. All right, then. Thank you very much, Mr. Alexis, for your presentation today, and Mr. Oka, thank you also for for making the celebration. Yeah. Well. Yeah. So thank you very much again.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So I will give it back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. It was such an amazing and very inspiring presentation. We will go ahead and take some time for a question. I'm sorry. Before we end this meeting, we also have a photo session. So please, to the audience, to turn on your camera. And for Marshanda, our documentation committee, you may take over from now. Please turn on your camera.
Isn't it turned on? Yeah, it's turned on, right?
Yeah, turn on the camera. Still on.
Is it not turned on? Can't you not see me?
We can see you.
We can see you. We can see you.
Okay. So what do I need to do? I'm sorry.
You just have to smile.
Just
smile.
Just sit still. Just sit still. Just sit still. Someone will give instruction 1, 2, 3, and then photo.
Okay. On my count on 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Oka, and also the audience.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
On behalf of Kajian Studi Ilmiah from Trisakti University, we are very much looking forward to having you again at our next event. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation form after the session ends. And also don't forget to follow our Instagram at Ekskursi Ars Trisakti and check our virtual exhibition at www.artsteps.com. Okay, that will end our event for today. My name is Dian and enjoy the rest of your day.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Hello, Alexis. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Freut mich, dass this is send. Mute, still mute. Dein.
Freut mich mal wieder Deutsch zu sprechen. Sehr schön.
Ja. Du musst probieren, denn sonst vergesse ich alles.
Aber es hört sich perfekt an, ja? Also nur perfekt.
Ich muss probieren.
Super. Na dann, vielleicht sehen wir uns ja mal persönlich hier in Bali.
Ja, gerne. Ja, gerne. In Bali oder in Deutschland.
Ja. Gehen Sie auch zurück manchmal?
Ja, nächstes Jahr wollte ich nach Deutschland fliegen. Wenn alles in Ordnung ist.
Ja. Ja,
Weißt du,
ich werde hier sein.
Ja, bis jetzt gibt es noch viele Schwierigkeiten, nach Deutschland zu fliegen, weißt, wegen Corona-Bedingungen. Mute.
Ja, jetzt,
I see.
Ja, definitiv wird es spannend mit dieser ganzen Corona-Geschichte, auf jeden Fall.
Ja. So ist das.
So ist es im Leben.
Ja. Gib doch deine Telefonnummer oder Adresse, dann kann ich auch dir besuchen in Bali.
Alles klar.
Ja.
Ich gebe das der Diane, okay?
Ja, klar, kein Problem.
Okay, perfect.
Dia nanti dia ngasih nomor telepon ya sama itu email address atau address link di sana ya. Alexis, bist du auch Balinese?
Leider nicht. Noch nicht.
Ja, das ist genug schon zu lernen, ja, eigentlich.
Ja, ich lerne Bahasa Indonesia.
Bahasa Indonesia lieber ya.
Ja. But ich muss noch ein bisschen mehr lernen, aber es geht langsam voran.
Ya, sustain. Ya, oke. Sudah nih Dian?
Iya Pak, saya nggak ada kontak Bapak, nanti saya kasih aja. Saya minta.
Enggak, maksudnya ininya lanjut atau?
Boleh di lift Pak.
Oh, ini masih banyak itu yang.
Iya, nggak.
Lagi ngisi form evaluation Pak.
Oh, ngisi evaluation. Wah, ya saya nggak bisa ngisi. Nanti saya isi. Saya ada di itu ya, di apa? Di mana?
Di chat. Di kolom komentar.
For Alexis, if you want to leave the meeting room, it's okay. You leave now. If you want.
Thank you, Mr. Donair.
Mr. Alexis.
Thank you. Bye.
Oke, cheers Alexis.
Cheers. Bis bald.
Masuk ya?
Ja.
Oke. Bleib gesund.
Ciao, Oka. Bis dann. Tschüss.
Ya, bis dann. Oke, cheers. Oke, saya leave ya. Oke, thanks, sukses. Bagus acaranya. Keren acaranya, sip. Berikutnya lanjut lagi.
Pak.
Ya, Bu Lina, apa kabar, Bu Lina?
Ya, baik. Sukses untuk semuanya.
Matur nuwun.
Hebat ini,
Teman-teman, terima kasih.
Sebelumnya belum sempat disambut. Selamat sore Bu Endang.
Nggak apa-apa, udah bagus, udah senang lihatnya. Insya Allah bisa bikin lagi, nanti tidak ke Bali tapi kemana gitu ya.
Amin.
Ada Bu Cici, ada ya Bu Cici tadi ya.
Bu Cici, selamat sore Bu Cici.
Bu siapa lagi itu?
Sore semuanya, keren.
Matur nuwun Ibu. Ada Bu Rita juga.
Oh, Bu Rita. Bu Rita sambil dengan cucunya pasti.
Oke.
Sambil bermain. Oke, thank you ya. Saya lihat ya.
Pak, Bu. Keren.
Oh, ada Pak Uce juga. Selamat sore Pak Uce.
Wah, ada Pak Uce. Share fotonya ya nanti, Jagat.
Siap Pak.
Yuk, thanks ya. Oke, see you.
Matur nuwun Pak.
Ya, tetap sehat semua ya.
Udah ngisi ya, Jagat.
Iya, siap
Saya
Bu.
udah ngisi, udah pesen buku juga.
Weh.
Makasih Bu.
Itu dia ya.
Ngisi apa sih? Ngisi apa?
Ngisi form evaluation.
Ngisi suruh ngisi sertifikat sama pesen buku udah dua-duanya ya.
Ya, belum lihat lagi.
Semua ya. Saya
udah deh.
ya.
Gimana kalau pesen caranya gimana ini?
Untuk Bu Endang secara eksklusif bakal dikirim sama wisuda form evaluation sama form bukunya Bu. Biar Bu Endang bisa pesan 3 buku gitu.
Ya, boleh dibagi-bagi nanti. Terima kasih Jagat, terima kasih.
Ibu.
Ya.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Bagi teman-teman dan partisipan yang sudah mengisi form evaluation, mungkin boleh untuk segera leave karena selanjutnya akan digunakan untuk rapat evaluasi. Terima kasih. Terus udah selesai. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Oke. Di grup, di conversation kayaknya. Yes. Ini kan yang ada evaluation form untuk pemesanan buku. Wah, nah nih. Ini belum masuk sih di line gua. Untuk sertifikat kan?
Tadi gue pengen ngapain ya lupa.
Iya, gua udah. Terus diapain itu? Gua udah lihat kok udah bener. Biar dibantu dosen-dosen mengingatkan Bu Eti untuk tanda tangan.
Yang pesertanya kayaknya di ini aja deh, di iya udah di.
Marsanda kirim, aduh belum ada Marsanda ya.
Marsanda udah join?
Marsanda, halo Marsanda.
Belum. Lagi di
belum.
Gitu. Dia baru bilangnya udah.
Oke. Marsanda, tolong dikirim ke gua ya dokumentasinya.
Oke.
Siap. Terus apa? Gak bisa makan-makan. Nggak ada. Iya, bagi-bagi sertifikatnya sekarang aja yuk. Mau.
Kata Dita LPJ.
Oh iya, LPJ ya lu semua, jangan lupa ya. Hahaha. Tok, sertifikatnya mau kita bagi-bagi sebanyak-banyaknya atau gimana? Kalau 50, satu orang 50 agak capek kan? Oke.